Welcome to the Comical Engineers Fun and Facts with LCTS. In part 1 of episode 8, we sit down with Dr. Paul Schubert, an experienced chemist and energy industry leader, as he walks us through the foundations of his career. Paul shares how his academic journey in chemistry led him into refineries, bromine plants, and catalyst development, and how early hands-on industrial experience shaped his professional mindset. From scaling catalysts at Engelhard to navigating corporate complexity at Phillips Petroleum, this episode explores the realities of translating laboratory innovation into real-world industrial applications. Paul also reflects on the frustrations that come with hierarchy and what ultimately pushed him to start looking for something different. This episode ends right at the moment where a new opportunity appears, setting the stage for what comes next. Let's dive in.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Welcome to the Comical Engineers Fun and Fact with LCTS, a new episode of our podcast. My name is Schubert. As usual, please subscribe to our channel on YouTube or on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Like our episode and share it with everybody that you think will like it. With me again, my friend and colleague, Stan Spears. Good morning, Stan.
Good morning.
And we have our guest, Dr. Paul Schubert, with us today.
Hello.
Okay. The first thing we usually do, Paul, is to ask you to give, a short background on your, the highlights of your career and how you got to doing what you do today.
Sure. So I earned a bachelor's degree in chemistry from the University of Arkansas, and then got my PhD at the University of Illinois doing sonochemistry. So actually using high intensity ultrasound to cause various kind of bizarre reactions in solutions. And I was actually the first graduate student for my professor. And it's a long time ago, such that a few years ago, he retired. And yet I'm still here working. But it was an interesting thing. Then I got into kind of the work world, and really, well, I guess actually I worked as a lab technician for a while. Worked at a refinery. It was the Lion Oil refinery in El Dorado, Arkansas. I worked on asphalt pipeline coatings and learned how to coat pipelines and piping and all sorts of things like that. Did weather testing and kind of interesting things. Then I worked I worked summers and kind of Christmas time at a bromine plant. So in South Arkansas, where I grew up, it's kind of the Western Hemisphere's source of bromine, and my father was a chemical engineer who designed and built bromine plants in South Arkansas. So, so kind of the nepotism thing. I got a job, summer job working for his company as a lab tech, which was really, kind of an introduction to industrial chemistry. And I really liked it. And so I thought, this is what I wanted to do. My father was a chemical engineer, and he gave me good advice. He said, if you're going to go into chemistry and you don't want to do either sales or work as a technician the rest of your life, you probably need to get a PhD because that's where the market is. And I think that's pretty much, still fairly accurate. And after I graduated from University of Illinois, I went to Engelhard, which was one of the major catalyst producers. They're now part of BASF. And it was interesting because I did have a team. We worked on heavy oil cracking catalysts. So that's kind of where I started. And actually, I had a woman engineer working with me, and her technician, she was a chemical engineer, but her technician was a bachelor's degree chemist who graduated the same year she did from the same college that she graduated from. And I think that, I really did learn it kind of at the bachelor's level in chemistry that, you learn the theory, you learn how to run, or this is back a long time ago, you learn how to run lots of instrumentation, analyze things. But in contrast, I think the chemical engineers really learned how processes worked and largely came out trained to do a job, and the chemists maybe not so much, or at least not at the same level. But anyway, at Engelhard, I got into developing the catalysts at the bench scale, and then doing the scale up all the way to making initial catalyst production runs at that were, like a minimum run for testing in a catalytic cracker was like 100 tons. So pretty significant production. And one of the other things that I really wanted to do was I kind of figured that if I was going to supervise, other people, particularly the technicians and engineers working on significant equipment like spray drying or extruding or anything like that, that I actually should learn myself how to run those pieces of equipment. So, so that's one of the things I did. I learned how to run kind of every type of forming equipment. I will tell you, I got in trouble once because, this was back in the day of very formal work. And I was actually learning and running a small heavy oil cracking test unit, and I didn't have my coat and tie on. And so my boss, another PhD chemist, got on to me because I was not dressed appropriately for the work environment. I just had a lab coat on and a regular shirt. So anyway, I was wearing dress pants though, but that was insufficient. It was not the appropriate dress, but it was, really was a great learning experience because I really did get a good feel for what it took to actually do the work. And I would say that, that served me very well through the rest of the career because you got an appreciation for what the other people's day really was like, kind of the challenges of working with some pretty large scale industrial equipment. And so this was out in New Jersey, and I grew up in Arkansas and part in the Midwest, Indiana. And I would say East Coast was it was just a different place. Nothing necessarily wrong with it, just and so there was this desire to if I could move back more into an environment that was like home. And I actually at Engelhard pretty quickly became technical liaison with a number of major oil companies. So originally Amoco, which became BP, and then one of the other ones was Phillips Petroleum. And Phillips was actually having some challenges. They had a very innovative group of scientists and engineers, developed a lot of technology, but they were having difficulty moving that technology from kind of lab scale up to production. And so as I worked with them on our catalyst offerings and what we were developing and served as technical liaison, one day they asked me if I would be interested in potentially joining Phillips. And it's like, okay, Oklahoma, I'm from Arkansas. That's probably about as close as I thought I could get. And so I went to work at the Phillips Research Center, and I'll tell you a funny story here at the end about some of the kind of crazy stuff that we did there. But
yeah, so Oklahoma is a good place to carry for the funny stories. It'll work great there for sure.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So anyway, I went into a group that was the catalyst development manufacturing team. So our kind of mission was to do scale up and tech transfer of any catalyst or catalyst type material coming out of R&D and going into and try and get it to a scale that you could transfer it to a third party for manufacturing, so toll manufacturing. And it turned out that a lot of the real issue was that when you do things at the lab scale, you don't necessarily think about what's required for manufacturing. And so we really got into things like, what's the choice of chemicals? Just the reagent you pick off the shelf might be crazy expensive at a bulk scale, or the granules you create at the lab, they don't have mechanical integrity. And so I worked on all sorts of different catalysts, and both liquid phase and solid phase, and did scale up and tech transfer. And it really was a great exposure. And we had a crazy budget for our group. One year we had like $20 million. This was back in the 1980s, to buy manufacturing equipment. So I made pellets, I made pills, I made extrudates, I made granules, I made liquid catalysts. It was just kind of like everything, and a whole range of various catalysts. But I would say the one thing that I really missed there was the interaction with potential customers. So just an example, at Phillips at the time, it was very hierarchical. And so we were developing a catalyst to go into a unit at one of the refineries that they had going. So as a replacement and supposedly catalyst improvement. In order to talk to the engineer in the refinery that was actually going to use the material, I had to talk to my boss. He had to talk to his boss. His boss had to talk to the guy at the boss of the refinery, talk to the supervisor, and then I would get to talk to the engineer. And so you had to go through this whole chain all the time. And it was like, oh, this is just frustrating. And so it was like, I thought I wanted to do something different. And I was approached by another company.
That wraps up part 1 of episode 8 of The Comical Engineers, Fun and Facts with LCTS. A big thank you to our hosts, Engelhard Luque and Stan Spears, for guiding us through the early chapters of Paul Schubert's journey, from education and refineries to large-scale catalyst development and corporate lessons. Don't miss part 2, where Paul reveals who that other company was and dives into green chemistry, working with a Nobel Prize-winning scientist and a critical failure that reshaped his approach to quality and leadership. And as always, follow, share, and subscribe so you never miss what's next. Until next time.